Story 1. There would be a holiday if the weather behaved differently, but now if that happens, we have to attend online classes. Story 2. Critical thinking. Most people today struggle to form purely independent thoughts and instead rely on a wealth of information from the internet. It must be assumed that this skill will eventually be lost in humanity. Story 3. Privacy from intrusive technology and freedom. The pre-September 11 world had more freedom than we do today. Story 4. I wonder what it would feel like to walk around in a Blockbuster again, browsing all the movies and games to rent. Probably really old-fashioned, silly, with a hint of nostalgia and a bit of an existential crisis. I am starting to feel like my grandparents just thinking about it. Times change so fast. Story 5. Compact discs and having to actually buy your music to listen to songs you like. Streaming just makes things easier. Story 6. Having to wait for people with no way to contact them, with nothing to fill the time except perhaps a book. Story 7. The world without the technological influence of large language models. They are starting to be more widely adopted. Artificial intelligence is here to stay, and we are not going back. Story 8. A kid's life born after 2020 is very different from the upbringing I had in the 1980s and 1990s. Every single thing is different, starting with the attitude of the parents. New parents know how to set boundaries for themselves and their families. They are raising children more gently, using proper communication skills instead of the seen and not heard mentality I grew up with. Life was relatively great in the 1980s and 1990s, much simpler. Things started to change in the 2000s, and now we are dealing with the fallout of the internet and the changes in the world because we did not know how to handle these developments. It has been new territory, and we have made many mistakes. However, I believe the world will improve again once we adapt to the changes and learn from our mistakes. Children born after 2020 may hopefully benefit from our experiences and live better lives than we do now. Story 9. Rotary dial phones, affordable housing, and good affordable fast food, which is now overpriced and low quality. Hanging out with other kids in the neighborhood, riding bikes until dark, and so on. Now, they play video games for more than 5 hours with those same friends, but it takes away from the in-person experience. Story 10. They will never understand the sheer joy of waiting for your favorite television show to come on at a set time, then having to suffer through those annoying commercials. A whole hour of suspense, then bam, interrupted by an advertisement for yogurt. Story 11. Consensus reality. All the mainstream television channels and newspapers used to overwhelmingly agree on the facts. The argument was over what they meant and what should be done about them. This view was not always accurate, as part of how we got here is that they lied a lot. However, the vast majority of Americans accepted these views. Today, there is no mainstream consensus, and people have completely different beliefs about even the most mundane, easily verified things. Story 12. The save icon in Microsoft Office, as well as the paste icon. Commercial breaks. And this song. Story 13. Everyone was listening to the same music on the radio. Back in the last century, when the only streams you encountered would just get your feet wet, there was a thing called radio. Most towns had only 3 or 4 stations to choose from. There was a strong probability that the car full of kids next to you at the traffic light was listening to the same station. Heads would bang in unison. There was bonding at the intersection. Story 14. The bulk candy aisles in supermarkets quietly disappeared at one point. Similarly, the free sample kiosks inside supermarkets also disappeared. Story 15. The correct order to watch the core Star Wars films is Episode 4, Episode 5, Episode 6, Episode 1, Episode 2, Episode 3, Episode 7, Episode 8, and Episode 9. I do not know where to place the other Star Wars films and shows. Story 16. How to be okay with being bored or having to wait for something. Elementary school children are already much worse at delayed gratification than they used to be. The immediacy of everything in our lives today has created generations of people who genuinely cannot stand waiting. Story 17. In this thread, people are forgetting what happened before 2020. Sure, Kids born after 2020 won't know what it was like before having electricity or using a horse for transportation, but neither do kids born before 2020. Story 18. Spending the day outside riding bicycles and coming home after the streetlights come on. Simpler times when you had to entertain yourself without the internet. Story 19. Typewriters, manual car windows, manual car locks, many manual transmissions, smoking on airplanes, walking family members to the gate, calling a girl and having to talk to her father. Story 20. How Diddler Donnie became president, and why we did not immediately impeach him when he began violating the Constitution. We will have to explain this to our children. Story 21. Payphone booths. No Ubers, just taxis. 3 to 4 channels rather than hundreds, and you had to manually pick them. Catering to every unnecessary need, we did not have this back then. Story 22. How anyone could go into an airport, wait at the gate with their loved ones to see them off or pick them up. Story 23. Life before the internet was different. We used to play outside. My brother has children, and they spend most of their time indoors on their smartphones. It is genuinely concerning to watch. Story 24. Life before social media. I was born in 1997, and I think I got the best of both worlds. Obviously, for most of my childhood, I did not have social media, but it came fast and did not go away. Seeing kids go through their formative years so concerned with social media is, well, concerning. Story 25. There was once a time when any perceived ineptitude or whiff of dishonesty would likely end your career in politics. Dan Quayle erroneously corrected a child who spelled potato correctly in a spelling bee, and it pretty much ruined him. Michael Dukakis looked a little goofy wearing an oversized tank helmet in a picture, which contributed to his image and loss. Imagine the Four Seasons landscaping controversy and how that should have reflected on the entire group. Adding a journalist to a non-government chat application to discuss top-secret war plans. I remember a time when this would have put people in jail or at least gotten them laughed out of government. Story 26. Leaving the house in the summertime at 8 o'clock in the morning and coming back after dark while playing with your friends, with nobody concerned. Maybe coming home for lunch and then taking off again. Walking down the street at 12 years old with your bow, an arrow to head out a mile or two to farmlands and woodlands to hunt. And nobody thought that was strange. Walking a mile and a half to school during Wisconsin winters throughout the entire winter was just the norm for many kids. We had freedom to a much greater degree than children have now. Story 27. To physically own a piece of digital media or items should be repaired instead of everything being overpriced and non-reparable. Story 28. Honestly, learning to ride a bicycle, I fear, is becoming much more niche. It is an endangered skill, and I wonder how long it will be before no one teaches their child how. Story 29. The COVID-19 pandemic. Spending a year at home, shops closed, schools shut, not being allowed outside, and living with a curfew. Story 30. Bruises on the knee from biking or sports are supposed to be a part of childhood, not memorizing a million dances. Story 31. How exciting it was when caller identification was standard for all landlines before mobile phones existed. That was so futuristic. Story 32. My children, born in 2014 and 2016, did not understand commercials when the streaming services recently started to reintroduce them in large numbers. They were very upset and complained about the constant commercial interruptions. Story 33. How great YouTube used to be. Sure, it is still full of great content, but 2012 and 2013 were different times. Forums. The Minecraft forum was much cooler than the subreddit. Remember the Temple of Notch post? We're discussing Herobrine, Miniclip, Newgrounds. Here is a Central Europe-specific answer. Snowy winters. When all your friends were playing on the street because there was nothing else to do. Everyone knowing about the latest episode of XYZ. Cool technology. Who else remembers fighting a giant mantis on Xbox Kinect? That was awesome. Story 34. The freedom of being unreachable. Having been a kid of the 1960s, my parents were comfortable with me leaving the house in the morning and being gone with no way to contact me until dinner time. Story 35. I used to have to call collect, then prank call my parents in a particular pattern from a payphone so they would know to come pick me up. But as long as they did not answer, nobody got charged. You could also say the whole message to them in the 3 seconds you had to say your name. Story 36. There is a strong chance that many children born after 2020 may never experience driving in the same way we do now. Story 37. Children today have never even seen an encyclopedia. In my time, we used encyclopedias as research material to study and write papers. It was my internet. Story 38. Nice weather. We are the ones who completely damaged the environment and did not listen to the scientists for decades. The children after 2020 will blame us, and they are completely right. Story 39. Talking to your friend or lover in the kitchen where your parents could hear everything. Digging in the dirt just because. Saturday morning cartoons were special since the rest of the week was just The Simpsons. How a 1990s kid could have fun with nothing, no technology needed or even wanted. Learning actual survival skills and how to use certain items, not internet content but real scouts, and making a campfire yourself to prove to the instructor you could do it and earn a badge. The collection of Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts badges was real-life achievement to be proud of. Polly Pockets, Archie Comics, Pogs, or playing a string game called Cradle, I hardly remember how now. How to have fun with just a pack of cards. How to work out with a pack of cards. A pack of cards was entertainment for years. All that is a bygone era. The 2000s marked the end of one era and the birth of a new one. Depending on your parents, you might be more old-fashioned or modern. To compare Atari versus Xbox. Story 40. Being out of contact with everyone. Just going somewhere where no one knows your location and cannot contact you. Story 41. Maybe a strange thing, but social distancing, staying in lockdown, and wearing masks, they did not really experience the coronavirus pandemic at an age where they would remember it. Story 42. The unique panic of having to print out MapQuest directions and realizing you missed a turn, making the rest of the pages useless. Story 43. What life was like before artificial intelligence. What life was like before we all became aware of our own mortality and how foolish the human race can be. They said World of Warcraft was not a good model for a real pandemic. No one would be that foolish when real life and death were on the line. That knowledge is now embedded in society. Story 44. I have more than one thing. School mass shootings. When I was younger, we solved every issue with a fist fight. Sundown meant get inside. No cell phones or tablets to be your babysitter. Actually meeting people to make friends in person, not online or via any social application. No food delivery services. The joy of waking up early on a Saturday to see cartoons through 4 different channels. Story 45. Having to knock for friends to come and play or calling their house phone and speaking to their parents first. Story 46. Playing football and riding my bike until it got dark. I literally spent my childhood outside. I spent most summers sleeping in a tent in the backyard. Story 47. They will never understand that everything, everywhere, and everyone has not always been a controversial conspiracy designed to erase whatever the internet tells people they need to be against. I apologize for the run-on sentence. In the past, teachers used red pencils to mark them. Story 48. Keeping your game console powered on so you do not lose your progress. Pausing your game, then unplugging the RCA cables to see what is showing on television. Game Genie. Commercials, for example, bathroom and snack breaks. Flipping the channels during a commercial break and forgetting to go back, or returning to the channel when the show is already back on. Friday night primetime shows and Saturday morning cartoons. Story 49. How hard coronavirus disease 2019 really was. Maybe because I experienced it, but children learning about it in school will never be able to grasp how bad it actually was. Story 50. How much fun it was to walk to a friend's house in the summer with no cell phone. You just told your parents you were going out for a bit, and poof, the only way they could get you was to call the friend's house via landline. Also, the absolute thrill of bringing a movie home, going to Blockbuster or another rental place, walking the aisles with the smell of VHS tapes and popcorn permeating the air, selecting a movie you've seen advertised in a magazine or the newspaper and feeling so excited that you get to watch it in your pajamas at home with a pizza. Story 51. I have been working with a new employee, helping them pay the federal Form 941 taxes for the company through the Real ID website. They use two-factor authentication and call the office. She did not know how to answer the landline. She was about 28 years old. Story 52. 24-hour grocery stores allow you to make a late-night run for something or choose to shop late at night if you are awake. They are also convenient after work if you have a third shift. Story 53. What it was like to live as a famous athlete in the old Stone Age. It was millions of years before written language, let alone recorded history. Story 54. I am still waiting for my Scholastic Book Club order to arrive 40 years later. I cannot wait to find out what shenanigans Curious George gets into. Story 55. This is incredibly niche. Needing to purchase your own baseball bat. I played baseball my whole life, recreational baseball until age 12, then competitive through my first year of university. After COVID-19, I stopped playing. Last year, I got back into the game coaching my friend's son and his team. I was shocked when I found out that the organization's requirement was for each player to purchase their own bat at age 8 or 9. I always had my own bat but was fine sharing with teammates or, if I was slumping, using another bat provided by the team. I was shocked that this is no longer allowed. It makes the sport much more expensive than it needs to be. Story 56. That Arctic Monkeys song, with the part where she presses the star after unlocking. To be honest, I think that applies to anyone born after 2000. Story 57. That you either had to earn nude images by wooing someone or sneak in on your father's adult content collection rather than clicking on a mouse. Story 58. Having 3 channels that went off the air each night with the Star-Spangled Banner followed by Space Static. If you missed the show, that was it. You would just hope for a rerun. Story 59. Sitting and waiting for a doctor in the waiting room with no device, just hoping one of the random magazines covered in germs will keep you from being bored for 20 to 30 minutes. Story 60. Pixel art video games were originally created due to hardware limitations, not because they look retro or old school. Story 61. The trauma of dial-up internet screeching while you are waiting to load a single web page for 10 minutes. Then your mother gets on the phone and ruins the whole experience. Story 62. Experiencing thick, and I mean thick, snow in September in the United Kingdom. Now, in the United Kingdom, it is sunny in September. Snow is just not like that anymore, not in the United Kingdom. Story 63. I don't know. Growing up, I never really had a set time I had to be back home. My parents always knew where I was and how to get in contact. The only rule was to come home for dinner or tell them you were fending for yourself. I feel like this made us less naive to the real world. Story 64. We used to live in a world where one person working a single full-time job that did not require a degree could own a home and 2 cars, while their spouse stayed at home to raise their 2 children and still save for retirement. Story 65. We used to do homework by reading encyclopedias, dictionaries, conducting library research, and live interview research. Nowadays, people can just search the internet or use artificial intelligence to find information. We also had to handwrite homework, essays, and everything else. Story 66. The excitement when your parent was about to go out and get some food. You got to ride in the car with your siblings to pick out what you wanted or get a nice surprise from the working parent when they came home, like a bunch of donuts for doing well in school. Nowadays, you can simply order everything and have it sent to the house. Or if you did go to school, then that did not matter. Story 67. All Flash games. Even with them being saved by the archive team, the children I worked with did not know what they were. Story 68. Waiting once a year to watch your favorite movie on television. And if you were not home, waiting another year. I remember The Wizard of Oz was something we looked forward to every year. Story 69. If my current students are any indication, the difference between I was not heard and they heard me, but then they said no is significant. Story 70. Only being able to have one program open at a time on your computer and not being able to cut from one program and paste into another. Story 71. Free-range kids disappear with your friends on bicycles and do not come home until the streetlights come on. Story 72. Potentially nothing significant, considering the current state of the world. Schools are not providing much value to students after middle school. From elementary through middle school, students are learning mainly newly implemented content, and many important topics have been removed. As a result, even smart students may not be very knowledgeable. Without the right teacher, your child may struggle to learn how to read properly or may lose this ability, which is happening to many people, including high school students. Story 73. Breathing in secondhand smoke everywhere you go in public. Yes, there are vaporizers that have their own unknown issues, but I would prefer being near that than cigarette smoke. Story 74. Social media did not used to be an endless stream of content. I remember when my Instagram feed had an end. It meant I had seen all the pictures, no videos yet, that the people I follow and only those people had posted in the last few days. I remember wishing there was more to look at back then, and that was a cursed monkey's paw wish. Story 75. How food is supposed to taste. The vast majority of manufacturers have switched ingredients to cheaper alternatives because of rising costs, and there is no incentive to change back when prices settle. Story 76. I told my grandson about a dream I had when I was his age. I was in a telephone booth, picking up cash and checks that were all over the floor. "What is a telephone booth?" he asked. Story 77. Being completely off-grid until you get home at night, fully experiencing life disconnected from the system. Story 78. Being a secondary school student in lockdown, I had been in year 7 for 6 months when lockdown began. I was not enjoying it much, so it was good for me. However, my sleep schedule still has not recovered. It has only gotten worse. Story 79. How to form their own opinions. Some things are disliked not because they are bad, but because one person disliked them and everyone else decided to join in. Story 80. Using a pencil to rewind or untangle a cassette tape, especially one used to record your favorite songs from the radio. Story 81. Watching the school cancellation ticker at the bottom of the local newscast like a Wall Street stockbroker the morning after a snowstorm. Story 82. What it is like to start college with a fair level of certainty that the field you choose to study will still exist as a viable career option by the time you graduate. Story 83. Having to wait for a week until the new episode of your favorite television show was released and feeling upset when you missed it because there was almost no way to rewatch it unless a family member watched and recorded it for you, at least in my family with our resources. Story 84. The leftover floor markers in businesses and public spaces signify 6-foot social distancing. Story 85. A lot of people born well before 2020 will never understand many of these, but 1. The thrill of walking around in a store and seeing a Nintendo 64 showing off Super Mario 64 for the first time. The controversy Mortal Kombat provoked. Sure, violence in video games is still a controversial topic, but back then, parents were very upset. The O.J. Simpson murder trial taking over the television networks. It was everywhere. The September 11th attacks and the mass hysteria they caused. Tuning into a scrambled adult channel on television and trying to watch it without paying. The audio was usually not scrambled very well, and occasionally the image on screen was not either, so you might get the slightest glimpse of something inappropriate. It turns out, though, that imagination was probably naughtier than anything actually shown on screen. Story 86. Non-commercialized applications. No advertisements. A time before subscriptions, everything was straightforward. Everything is predatory and wants your money. You used to be able to pay for an application or a service and get no advertisements. It was the paid versus free applications. Now you pay and still get advertisements. Sure, there were pop-ups and viruses in the early internet days, but now companies spend money researching ways to make their products or advertising addictive. It feels like all mobile applications have tricks to lure you in. In college, I had over 100 fun $1 application games. I rarely use applications now. Even my Spider Solitaire application, which I've used for years, started placing mandatory advertisements after every game. I used to be able to close the application and reload it, which would skip the advertisement. Now it does not skip the advertisements. So I just paid $20 for a completely advertisement-free application. I also paid for the Museo application after Google Music was shut down. It was about $5 for the advertisement-free version. After 5 years, it changed to pay $5 a week for advertisement free, with no lifetime or annual option. So I rejected that. Everything wants my money, and companies release poor and annoying products, asking you to pay for something worthwhile that doesn't waste your time. Story 87, T9. However, I imagine even people born after the year 2000 will not know what this is. My brother, born in 2001, does not. Story 88. The freedom of having no stimulus other than a breeze over your skin, the sunset in your eyes, and the smell of the world all day long. Story 89. Why were so many children born in the first half of 2021 compared to the years before and after their grade? Story 90. The internet and media were not available 24 hours and cost per minute to use. I still remember the national anthem being played on the British Broadcasting Corporation at the close of the day's transmissions. Story 91. A party line is a shared telephone line where multiple households are connected to the same physical line. Story 92. Having a college degree is meaningful. Many people use artificial intelligence for everything. The value of education and learning has declined. You do not need to work hard to get a degree. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.